Are we ready?
I think so.
Okay, we're going to call to order the regular Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting for Richfield. Please note the attendance. And our first item of business is the oath of office for Commissioner Aaron Vries-Daniels.
Raise your right hand. I, Aaron Vries-Daniels, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Minnesota, and the Charter and ordinances of the City of Richfield, and that I will faithfully execute and discharge the duties of the office of HRA Commissioner of the Housing and Redevelopment Authority of the City of Richfield, according to the law, and to the best of my ability and understanding. So help me. Yeah.
So welcome. All right. Our next item is consideration of the election of a secretary for the Richfield Housing and Redevelopment Authority for the remainder of 2017. Are there any nominations?
I will nominate Commissioner Vries-Daniels.
All right. So we have to ask this 3 times. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? All right. Hearing none, we will put it to the vote. All in favor of electing Commissioner Vries-Daniels as the secretary for the remainder of 2017, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Welcome, and now you are Madam Secretary. Thank you. All right. Our next item of business is approval of the minutes of the regular Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting for October 16th of 2017.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions, corrections, or discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes of the October 16th, 2017 meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved the minutes. Next, we need to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. Any additions? All right, all in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved this evening's agenda. Next, we move on to the consent calendar. Mr. Devich.
Thank you, Chair Supple, members of the HRA. For those at home, the consent calendar contains several separate items which are acted upon by the HRA in one motion. And once the consent calendar has been approved, all of the individual items and their recommended actions will also have been approved, and no further HRA action on these items is necessary. Tonight we begin with item A, which is consideration of the approval of a resolution authorizing an agreement with the Greater Metropolitan Housing Corporation for the acquisition, rehabilitation, and sale of homes under the New Home Program utilizing 2017 Community Development Block Grant Funds. Item B is consideration of the approval of a resolution authorizing the use of an affordable, Affordable Housing Initiative Fund loan for the acquisition of 6521 Stevens Avenue by the West Hennepin Affordable Housing Land Trust. Item C is consideration of the approval of a resolution accepting contributions for the 2017 Tour of Remodeled Homes. And finally, item D, consideration of the approval of a proposed adjustment of payment standard for the Section 8 Rent Assistance Program. And that concludes tonight's consent calendar.
Are there any items that anyone would like to have pulled? Are there any questions for Mr. Devich? All right, then we would need a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor of approving the items on the consent calendar, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved the consent calendar. Thank you. All right, item number 4 is consideration of the approval of resolutions adopting a modification to the redevelopment plan for the Richfield redevelopment project area, a modification to the tax increment financing plan for the Cedar Avenue Tax Increment Financing District, establishing Tax Increment Financing District 2017-1, the Chamberlain, within the Richfield redevelopment project area, and adopting a tax increment financing plan therefore. So, Mr. Devich.
Thank you, Chair Supple. I'm going to turn this right over to John Starr, Community Development Director, to proceed with this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. On September 26, 2017, the Council approved plans for the Chamberlain, a multifamily housing development on the city's east side that also includes a 2-block extension of Richfield Parkway. A revised contract for private development with Chamberlain Apartments, LLC, was approved by the HRA on October 16, 2017. This agreement calls for the HRA to establish Tax Increment Financing District 2017-1, a housing district, in order to facilitate redevelopment of the property and promote the development of affordable housing. The development area currently sits within an existing redevelopment TIF district, entitled the Cedar Avenue TIF District, that was established in 2005. Staff, HRA TIF analysts from Ehlers Incorporated, and the HRA attorney and the developer have all concluded that a new housing TIF district would be better suited to this development. In order to establish a new housing TIF district for the project, the 31 parcels within the project area must be removed from the existing Cedar Avenue TIF district. I will deviate a little bit from the staff report here to tell you that a lot of why we're creating a new TIF district as opposed to having this function within the existing TIF district is to the benefit of the HRA. It's much easier for us to track and report tax increment financing. Ultimately, the methodology of generating TIF, none of those things changes. It just makes it much easier for us to administer. And it also, the existing TIF district, we did get a 10-year extension at the legislature this summer, but even with that, it has about 22 and a half years left on it, whereas a TIF district in full has 26 years. So there's a little bit of extra time associated with this as well. The TIF plan estimates the generation of up to $25,586,527 of tax increment. This money will be available to reimburse the developer for TIF qualified expenses to the degree to which they evidence those expenses to us. The Planning Commission is scheduled to consider the proposed TIF district's compliance with the comprehensive plan on November 27th, and the City Council will hold a public hearing to consider establishment of the district on November 28th. We have with us tonight James Lenhoff from Ehlers & Associates. James provided us the consulting on this TIF district and is an expert in TIF. And with that, I believe James has a kind of a presentation.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you, John. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. My name is James Lenhoff with Ehlers & Associates, the city's financial consultant. John actually, I think, did a great job introducing the project, so I'll do my best to not repeat too much of what he said, but I do think there's a couple important points to go over whenever an HRA, EDA, or City Council is adopting a TIF plan. And also, since I believe we have one relatively new person, as we go along, do feel free to ask questions as we go through this. For those of you that have worked on it before, sometimes tax increment financing can be a little wonky, a little funky, and navigating through some of those details is important to understand ultimately what is being approved and how this relates to the project. So as noted by John, there are two actions before the HRA tonight. One, to remove the 31 parcels from the existing Cedar Avenue TIF district, but then also to create the new housing TIF district for the Chamberlain Apartments. I'm going to briefly talk just a very, very brief overview of TIF, very brief, so we can stop if there are any questions over that. A couple items related to the numbers, and then the two TIF plan modifications and creation itself. So I do always like to start with the TIF definition, just because I think it is really helpful to stop and think about the words. In TIF definition here, the ability to capture and use most, not all, but most of the increased local property tax revenues from new development within a defined geographic area. Now, before we get into any TIF, and the part that was really done in advance of the meeting tonight always relates to the but-for test. Any project that comes before the city, there's always going to be that first question when a developer asks for assistance of one, do they need assistance at all? And if they do need assistance, what is the minimum amount of assistance needed to make that project financially viable? We always want to make sure the city is not doing any more beyond what is absolutely necessary to get a project to move forward. And in this case, it is Eller's role to work with staff and with the developer to take all of that information, pull it apart in about every conceivable way, to the point where I'm sure the developer sometimes wants to yell at us because we ask so many questions, but to really get down to that nitty-gritty to get to exactly what might be needed by a project. Ultimately, we also will be involved in verifying the cost of development to ensure that the amount of assistance provided actually was needed. So although we often find that it is, there are cases where sometimes there could be savings. Now, just again, very quick, the building blocks of TIF, with any property that exists out there, they're privately owned. It is paying property taxes today. That is the base value. It has something that is coming to the city, the county, the school district, all of those jurisdictions. But when somebody builds something on it, that adds value. That's that incremental increase. And it's only that new value portion, and it's only some of that new value portion that ultimately becomes available potentially as tax increment financing back to a project. And as noted in that definition, it's also for a defined period of time. So a TIF district does not go on forever. John talked about an extension related to the existing Cedar Avenue TIF district, and the proposed Chamberlain district would go for the maximum 26 years that statute allows for. But as I noted, not all of that new value is actually captured in tax increment financing district as part of the assistance back to the developer. There are those base value taxes, so whatever happens to get paid today, those base value taxes still get paid to the city, county, and school district, even with the new project. Although it doesn't apply in this particular project, commercial properties pay state property taxes. When there are state property taxes, they still definitely take their cut. And then there's market value taxes, which this is where we get into the funkiness of state statutes and the way things are defined, and the market value taxes being that voter-approved school referendums. So that part of the taxes is actually based off the higher new value. So that levy actually benefits from the higher property value. With the housing TIF district, as I noted, it does have the 26-year maximum term. And one of the very important parts when you create a housing TIF district is that there are qualifications related to multifamily rental that we are talking about tonight, where a project must provide at least 20% of the apartments affordable at 50% of area median income, or 40% of the apartments affordable at 60% of area median income. I bolded on the screen here the 20% at 50% of AMI because that is what this project is providing, which we have verified as part of the pro forma review. And since very few people actually memorize what area median income is, and I hope none of you really have to memorize it, it's highlighted there depending on household size, from a household size of 1 up to 4, ranging from about $31,600 a year up to $45,000 a year. That is updated by HUD every year, and the developer is required to provide compliance materials on that every year. And in fact, they are required to do that in order to receive any assistance. Housing TIF, there are limited eligible uses, though when you're talking about the affordable housing part, it works for any part related to housing, land acquisition, demolition, and so on. There's a couple things that you can't pay for TIF, and that's actually fine with this project. You couldn't pay for recreational uses that are owned by the city or other city buildings, which of course doesn't apply here. The project itself being 316 mixed income apartments, 283 new construction, and 33 existing. I already noted the affordability aspect of it. And the HRA has actually already reviewed and approved the development agreement, the revised version just recently. And you'll note here the maximum amount of assistance of $8,492,000 over that 26 years. And we'll talk about the TIF plan briefly, and it was noted in the memo, it refers to a higher number. Just because a TIF district is capable of something doesn't mean that's the amount that would actually go to the developer. So this is the amount of assistance discussed in the development agreement, even though the TIF plan references a higher number. As also talked about, I'm sure, with the development agreement, it is pay-as-you-go TIF. So they only start receiving the assistance after the project is complete and after they start paying property tax. I don't expect you to read all of these tiny numbers on the screen, and I probably have committed a great sin by doing this in PowerPoint, but there were a couple, I think, really important parts related to the property taxes on this particular project. And as I noted, when it's in a TIF district, the project still has to pay those base value taxes, except in this particular project, a huge part of that area was already owned by the city, meaning it was taxed to them, right? So when we look at this, and as I have my little circle and arrows up there, the circle showing that zero base value, which then it doesn't produce any property taxes because the city doesn't pay itself property taxes. But in Minnesota, that's not how we calculate TIF. So with TIF, there is the shadow value. So in conversations with the county assessor, there is actually a value assigned to that property as though it was privately owned and ready for development. And what that means in this case is that based on pay 2017 tax rates, I'll go back for a moment, where we would have expected the city to receive about $18,500 when it was tax exempt, the base value taxes actually increased to about $37,000. You'll also note that the market value taxes increased as well, and the total taxes paid. That part is not captured by the tax increment financing district. But what is really gets exciting is when we look at that future valuation of property taxes, where we look at the future valuation of almost $44 million on the property. And at some point, the TIF district will indeed end, and values will likely be higher when that happens. But if we looked at it based on pay 2017 property tax rates, the city's portion of property taxes would be about $320,000 on a total of $826,000 in property taxes generated by the district. Of course, that will be something different in the future, but I think that provides some good context. Now, as I noted at the beginning, not all of that value is still captured by the district. Of the $826,000, once you deduct those base value taxes, market value taxes, auditor fees, and the city's administrative fee, we actually get to about $610,000 that would go to the project itself, or about 74 cents on the tax dollar paid is actually available for tax increment. So there are the two actions before you tonight. The first one, modifying that existing Cedar Avenue TIF district. Really the only two items happening here is removing those 31 parcels for including in the new district and extending the duration by 10 years as recently permitted by state statute. That is ultimately still subject to a public hearing with the City Council next Tuesday. And the second action is creating the TIF District for 2017-1, the Chamberlain. Within that planning the TIF plan is a planning document, and within that, if you had a chance to read it over, it does talk about the development objectives, the TIF district boundaries as shown on the screen, the maximum term of 26 years, that much bigger budget number than what is actually being provided to the developer, but that's the potential amount of assistance over time, and then loads and loads of fun statutory requirements that we like to include to make sure that everything being done correctly. Again, this is subject to a public hearing with the City Council next Tuesday. So with that, the very brief overview, I'm happy to stand for any questions. I would ask that you take these resolutions as separate actions for recording in the minute. Thank you.
All right, do we have any questions?
A
Right, go
statement.
ahead.
That's one of the best presentations explaining TIF I've ever seen, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other questions, Mr. Stark?
Well, this is a question I should have asked before tonight. I just wanted to clarify with James. Does the HRA need to take two separate actions? One to remove, to remove the parcels from the existing Cedar TIF district, and a second action to create the new TIF district?
Yes, we are asking them the HRA to take separate actions between the two. So the first resolution being that modification to remove the parcels, and it will actually extend the duration as well by 10 years. And then the second action being to create the new district. So yes, two separate actions.
Thank you.
All right, so if we're looking at the materials that you gave us, do we stop before we start with establishing? Is the second half where we go from establishing and the first half is before that? So we do this correctly?
Well, my
All right.
computer has
no,
the
I have it
EDA
right here, but
Yeah, I think that
did you put it on that one? Oh, thank you. So you helped us. I didn't see that.
Yes, and this is verbatim out of the resolution language. So if the chair and commission would like to use the language on the screen, that would match the proposed resolution.
All right. So is there someone
there
who
we
would
go.
like to make a motion?
But for the addition of the resolution numbers.
Sure, I'll make the resolution adopting the modification to the tax increment financing plan for the Cedar Avenue Tax Increment Financing District within the Richfield Development Project area.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to do that. Is there any further discussion or are there any further questions? All right, all in favor of adopting that first resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've adopted the modification to the tax increment financing plan for the Cedar Avenue Tax Increment Financing District within the Richfield Development Project area. Now, our next item is the second resolution.
I'll just make it. I'll move the resolution adopting a modification to the redevelopment plan for the Richfield redevelopment project area, establishing tax increment financing district number 2017-1, the Chamberlain, therein, and adopting a tax increment financing plan therefore.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion or are there any questions? All right, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, then we've taken care of both portions of that business. Thank you for that clear presentation.
Absolutely. Thank you tonight.
All right, then we'll move on to agenda item number 5, which is a public hearing and consideration of the approval of a resolution approving the conveyance of property located along the 18th Avenue between 66th and 68th Street to Chamberlain Apartments, LLC. Mr. Devich.
Thank you again, Chair Supple, members of the HRA. I'm going to turn this right over to John again to take care of this matter.
Thank you, Commissioners. On September 26th, the council approved plans for the Chamberlain, the multifamily housing development on the city's east side that includes a 2-block extension of Richfield Parkway. A revised contract for private development with Chamberlain Apartments LLC was approved by the HRA at its October meeting on October 16th, 2017. This agreement calls for the sale of land currently owned by the HRA to the developer for $1,711,445. The developer will pay $300,000 at closing, and the remainder will be paid over time with interest at 2% beginning August 1st, 2025, and continuing until the purchase price has been paid in full. I will note, and you'll see this under financial impact, that we are in ongoing discussions with the Metropolitan Airports Commission about the use of the proceeds of this, the sale of this property. The properties were acquired by the HRA in the 2002 to 2005 era using MAC grant funds. The grant agreement with the MAC has a degree of complexity to it about what the funds can and can't be used for the proceeds. When the properties were ultimately sold, it stated that they could only be used for certain airport eligible expenses. MAC's position is that there are very few of those kinds of expenses remaining in this geography, because one of the things that excludes a property from being, or excludes a cost from being airport expense eligible, is whether it has already had airport money expended on it for soundproofing. And so that is something that came to our attention within the last month or 6 weeks. So we've been working with the MAC on that understanding. Where it currently sits, I personally believe that the majority of the sale proceeds for this we will have to return to the MAC. So on the one hand, that is distressing that we won't be able to use those funds for other purposes. On the other hand, it was never our money to begin with, so it was kind of found money. But we are continuing to work through that. We are going to do everything we can to make sure that the city and or HRA can utilize the sale proceeds, but I want to give you a realistic outlook. So with that, I would stand for any other questions you might have.
Are there any other questions? All right, well, since there are no questions, let's open the public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to comment on this proposal? Okay, I'll ask one more time. Is there anybody that would like to comment? All right, seems like there is no one that wishes to comment. So at this point, we would need a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing. Are there any further comments?
You know, I do have a question, Mr. Stark. If MAC has an interest in the money and it's your opinion that eventually it's gonna go back to them, the $300,000 down payment going into escrow, or what's gonna happen to it?
Yeah, we'll set that aside while this is being resolved.
Okay. And anything is there any prohibitions or any problems with our receipt of the money from MAC in the first place, allowing us to sell it?
No,
Okay. So we can sell it, but they get the money.
right.
We get
Our
do we get a
hope-
finder's fee or
Yeah.
a commission or?
You know, our hope had been back in 2002 when we signed this grant agreement, and we did know at that time that proceeds had to be used on the acronym is AIP, airport. I can't remember what the I stands for, but they had to be AIP eligible expenses. And back in 2002, our hope was that the MAC and the FAA would continue their efforts to analyze and identify low frequency noise, and that low frequency noise in and of itself would be an AIP eligible expense. The reality is that we fought with MAC and the FAA over low frequency noise up until 2002, where they provided us with the grant funds, and maybe a little later until we settled, and this isn't the right legal terminology, but essentially we settled a lawsuit that resulted in a consent decree. After that point in time, I don't know that MAC or the FAA had a lot of motivation to study low frequency noise, and so that was essentially dropped.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions before we vote on closing the public hearing? All right, all in favor of closing the public hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've closed the public hearing. Are there any further questions? Okay, at this point, we need to act on the recommendation.
I will move the recommendation.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve a resolution approving the conveyance of certain real property to Chamberlain Apartments LLC. Do we have any further questions? Comments? All right, hearing none, all in favor of the resolution, please say aye.
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 All opposed? All right, we've passed the resolution. Thank you. Moving on to number 6, other business, is consideration of the approval of a petition requesting that the city council consider the vacation of portions of 67th Street within the boundaries of the new Chamberlain development. Mr. Devich.
Again, thank you, Chair, supple members of the HRA. This is pretty much a kind of a housekeeping issue that we need to deal with, and I'm going to ask Community Development or Director Stark to take it.
Thank you. In your previous action, you essentially approved the sale of a number of properties in adjacent 67th Street right-of-way to the Chamberlain Apartments LLC in order to allow for the construction of the Chamberlain project as approved. This sale includes a portion of what is now 67th Street right-of-way. There are 2 distinct sections of 66th Street that are proposed for vacation. West of 18th Avenue, the roadway in this area of 67th Street was largely removed a number of years ago. However, legally, the right-of-way remains. The right-of-way is no longer necessary and should be vacated. East of 18th Avenue, 67th Street provides a curved connection from 18th Avenue and Richfield Parkway to Cedar Avenue. This connection will be reoriented and reconstructed as part of the project. The existing right-of-way should be vacated and a new right-of-way dedicated as part of the platting process. As the owner of more than 50% of the land abutting this right-of-way, the HRA has asked to petition the council to vacate the road. And with that, I would stand for any questions you might have.
All right, Commissioner Breeze Daniels.
So the street's already gone. Is there a sign already that says dead end? Has all that been taken care of?
In one case, the street is gone. It was replaced by kind of a temporary road, and so there was no need to sign it dead end. It's where that street was is now grass, and there's just a temporary road, 20, 30 feet away. In the other case, it is currently a road.
Yeah, where it curves.
Where it curves, it just will no longer be the curve will be taken out and Richfield Parkway will proceed, pretty much directly south from the roundabout.
Is this the road where residents have created their own dead end sign?
No, it's
Is that
it's
down
the
further?
road that you would take to get to the Vinacopia building is part of it.
Okay.
That's right, isn't it?
Okay.
So it's
Thank
the-
you.
it's
That
the,
yes, that helps.
Are there any additional questions? All right, would someone like to take action?
I would move to approve the submittal of a petition requesting the vacation of the portions of 67th Avenue adjacent to the following properties: 6644, 6700, 6701, and 6709 18th Avenue and 6700 Cedar Avenue.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Are there any further questions, any comments, discussion? All right, hearing none. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've passed the motion. Thank you. Next, we have HRA discussion items on the agenda. Are there any matters that anyone would like to bring up?
Just like to officially welcome our new commissioner, and it's a small group up here, to 4 or 5 of us, and it's just great to have a new voice at the table, and just really welcome and look forward to your service on the HRA.
Echo those comments.
Yes, welcome. Did you want to say anything, or?
Not right now.
All right. Mr. Devich, are you going to update us on Cedar Point 2 and some of that kind of thing in your executive director's report, or?
Chair, supple members of the HRA. Actually, we're going to be doing something with Cedar Point 2 coming up next week.
next Tuesday.
Next
There's
Tuesday.
a work session.
There's a work session on it.
Okay.
That would be a very thorough update, or a more thorough update of where we stand right now with it.
The short update is we have a development team that's going to be here next week with a proposal.
Yeah.
So for the general public that's watching, they should watch for a meeting next week for a work session, and they can find out more at that
Yes.
point?
Yes, exactly.
All right, awesome, thank you. Any other discussion items? All right, then we'll move on to the executive director's report. Mr. Devich.
I'm going to ask, John's got one item he'd like to bring forth, and
Yeah, just one thing I wanted to mention. This was in the consent calendar, but I thought it was important to just have it be over the microphone and on TV. We did have a tour of remodeled homes in October, and we had 6 local sponsors donate $200 each for gift cards to hand out to participants, and I thought we should recognize them. So I'm going to read off their names. It was the Center for Energy and Environment, E.J. Hansen AIA, Mortgage Capital, Parsley Builders, Sakura Design Build, and Steve Schneeberger of Keller Williams Realty. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
All right, thank you.
And the only other comment I have, I want to congratulate our new commissioner. Not only did Commissioner Freeze Daniels get appointed and sworn in, but she already rose to an office on the HRA, and that's, yeah.
In a
that's-
matter of moments.
In a matter of
It was
moments.
There you go.
Exactly, rose right to the top.
Quite the ascent.
Yeah.
Stepped up. All right. Our last item of business is claims and payroll.
So moved.
Second.
All right, are there any questions or discussion items? All right, all in favor of approving claims and payroll, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved claims and payroll. Seeing no further business, we stand adjourned, and then we'll move into the EDA meeting shortly. Now, do you need to get sworn in for that as well?
Beth left, so I'm guessing.
I'll
I think
ask.
it's automatic.
Is it
It's
automatic?
automatic.
It's automatic?
You're automatic if you're on the HRA.
By
membership.
acclamation, it's automatic.
It's automatic, okay.
Okay. Nope.
EDA agenda, maybe, hard copy.
Thank you.
Thanks for thorough proofing.
Yes, I read the packet.
No, you get big time gold stars.
Oh, not 100, no, no, no,
Yeah.
no, no. No, reading is good. Reading is good. All right, so have we all switched over to the EDA?
Got
Looks
my
like,
EDA hat on now.
all right.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Up front.
I waved the baton at.
All right, so your second.
Keeps us on our toes, yeah.
At this point, we're going to call to order the meeting of the Richfield Economic Development Authority. Please note the attendance. Our first item of business is approval of the minutes of the regular EDA, or Economic Development Authority meeting of August 21st, 2017.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or clarifications or changes? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved the minutes. Next, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. Are there any questions? All right, hearing none, all in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved the agenda. Our next item of business is consideration of the approval of a resolution to accept transferred projects from the Richfield Housing and Redevelopment Authority. Mr. Devich.
Thank you, President Supple, because I think that's your title with the EDA. It's President Supple,
Yes.
correct? Yes. And members of the EDA.
All right.
This is, and both of these items are pretty much kind of on the housekeeping end. But I'm going to ask John Stark to do a quick summary of what we're doing here with this resolution.
Thank you, President Supple and Commissioners. The City Council adopted a resolution on May 9th, 2017, establishing the Richfield Economic Development Authority, or EDA. Since that time, the EDA has approved a 2018 budget that includes funding and administering certain activities that had been funded in the past by either the City of Richfield or the Richfield Housing and Redevelopment Authority. The specific programs meeting this description are the Kids at Home and the Transformation Home Loans programs. State statute governing the formation and administration of EDAs require that the City Council formally take an action to transfer such programs to the EDA and that the EDA formally accept the transfer. The City Council adopted a resolution to transfer programs to the EDA on October 24th, and now the EDA must accept these programs by the end of the year. And with that, I would stand for any questions you might have.
Are there any questions for Mr. Stark? All right, Commissioner
Just-
Reese Daniels.
Being new to the HR and EDA, why are these being transferred? Like, why are they better suited under the EDA than the HRA?
Yeah, it's a question of funding. Under the HRA, these programs, for the most part, were funded with tax increment financing. In discussions with the HRA financial consultants and HRA legal counsel, there were some questions about whether that was the best way to use tax increment financing proceeds. And really, the EDA largely came about over that very issue in looking for alternate ways to fund those two programs. The EDA has a levy authority And so the levy authority was identified as a way to pay for kids at home and transformation homes.
All right. Are there any other questions? All right. Would someone like to move the resolution?
I would move to approve a resolution relating to the Richfield Economic Development Authority and accepting the transfer of certain projects to such authority.
Second.
All right. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All right. You're okay? All right. All in favor of approving the motion or the resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved the resolution. Our next item of business this evening is consideration of the approval of revisions to the Transformation Loan Program Guidelines, updating the administration of the program. Mr. Devich.
Again, thank you, President Supple, members of the EDA. Another kind of housekeeping item, but I'm going to ask our housing specialist to make that presentation to the EDA.
Last year, the Transformation Home Loan Program issued 5 new loans and dispersed payment on 2 2016 loans for a total expenditure of $115,000. These funds were all committed and approved by the end of January 2017. And then in the months following, we had nearly 40 people calling and inquiring about the loan. For 2018, $131,000 has been allocated to the program. It should cover 6 to 8 loans, depending on the size of the projects. In order to better facilitate the distribution of the funds when the program is in high demand, as we expect it will be, we're proposing to make the following changes to the application process. Applications would be accepted during one set period of time. Staff would review applications and then award the funds once per year, unless there weren't enough applications during that application period. They'd be approved on the following criteria: the completeness of the application, adherence to program guidelines, design and function of the project, including the presence of any special or unique elements that meet city goals, like energy efficiency, accessibility, things like that. Demonstration of financial readiness, builder references, in cases where homeowners are doing part of the work, a history that they can show they have the skill and ability to complete the project in 1 year, and then the amount of funding requested. So once applications had been approved, a random lottery would be used to select which projects would be funded. For 2018, we're proposing to accept applications during January, review the applications and do the lottery between January 26th and February 13th, and then award them and close on the loans so people could begin their projects by the middle of March. And if we didn't use all the funding during January, we would just take applications on a first come, first serve basis following that period.
All right. Are there questions?
Just a comment. It seems like a very good plan. I'm glad that we were able to increase funding for this program when you look at the demand. And even then, still, there's clearly such a great demand. So I think it's something that warrants, as we do every year, and look at our needs and where we can make the most bang for our buck. Here's an area where I think we can. But this seems like a fair process and a good way to go about it. One question. I think we looked at earlier in the year some changes to our Richfield Rediscovered eligibility to look at people that had received a loan in a set amount of time, and really to make sure that this was not being used over and over again, that kind of thing. Do we run into that at all with the home loan program with multiple uses or year over year? Is that something to look at given the demand? Just a thought.
I can answer that. We have in the guidelines, it states that an applicant can apply once per house. So if they move to a different home in Richfield and 7 years has passed, they may apply for another loan.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Are there other questions? All right. Hearing none, do we have a motion to approve the recommended revisions to the Transformation Loan Program Guidelines?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved the revisions to the Transformation Loan Program guidelines. All right, do we have any EDA discussion items? All right, Executive Director's report, Mr. Devich?
President Supple, members of the EDA, I really don't have a report to make. The one comment I will make, though, is, excuse me, I just wish we had more funding for the for programs like the Transformation Loan Program, because obviously, as Kate indicated, there's such a demand for that program, and these are the kind of programs that really upgrade the housing stock in Richfield and encourage families to move in and stay into Richfield, because, you know, you get a home that that you can live through that whole family growing up cycle. It's just a great program. There's obviously so much desire for people to move into Richfield and be able to do this. We're always looking, but these are the kind of programs, this and Richfield Rediscovered, that are kind of the bread and butter of how Richfield is transforming itself into a community where people not only want to be, but have the kind of housing that that they want and need to make it through their family growing up. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further comments or any further business? All right, it seems we have completed our business, so the meeting stands adjourned. Thank you.